Good afternoon, Rhody Nation. We're back in the studio here on WRIU 90.3 FM Kingston. It's Mark Radigan here, back with Mark's Remarks. Another week, another show. So this week was trying to find some new teams that were in the off season to try and get some more reflections. We had AJ Pena on last week reflecting on the 2023 football season. And so this week I wanted to get another look. We've talked soccer a lot on this show. We've talked men's soccer a lot. But I wanted to get another look through a different lens, let's say, of this past year with this team. So today, I'm joined in the studio by a good friend of mine, redshirt sophomore goalkeeper for UHart men's soccer. I'm joined by Nate DiLoreto. Nate, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. This is another one of these shows that I'm very much looking forward to. I love having guys that I'm close with come on the show. And like I've talked about so many times, soccer is another just really big team for me. It's a team that I really like. I love working with you guys. I love covering you guys. So getting the chance to have you guys join me on my show is spectacular. So, I mean, to kind of just like jump right into it, you're in a particular case as a redshirt sophomore. You transferred in prior to not last season, but the season before from the University of Hartford as a Connecticut kid coming out of Bristol. So I want to just kind of start a little bit from the beginning with you to kind of touch upon your journey, because it's always interesting to hear the journey of players that jump from school to school that do that transfer, particularly regional transfers. But, I mean, just take me back, high school Nate DiLoreto, early soccer Nate DiLoreto. Just kind of walk me through what were the foundations that led to you pursuing a career in this game?
So, my freshman year in high school, I never really knew that, I wanted to pursue something in college. Freshman year of high school, didn't play at all, was mostly JV. And then sophomore year is kind of the year that I kicked everything off. Had a great season. We had a few all New Englanders that really kind of took us off. And it wasn't until junior year where everything kind of got real. We went 14-0-2, so we were undefeated in CCCs. I think it was Class L. One of my boys, Jake Woznicki, who plays for Stonehill, we kind of just took over. And that was when, everything kind of got real. I was starting to talk to coaches. Obviously, junior year for soccer is really when you can, start getting recruited and stuff. So that was kind of the year where, like I said, everything kind of kicked off. And then senior year, I think it was All-State or All-New England. I'm not really sure what it was. And that was when I committed to University of Hartford, before my senior year started.
And so that sort of decision to go to UHart, I mean, everyone's recruitment process is obviously different. And coming during the COVID times, too, that impacts it. But being a kid from an area so close to Hartford, was Hartford a school that you were always one that was kind of always looking at, or was it just a matter of how close it was that helped a lot?
Yeah, so funny enough, I actually grew up watching CCSU men's soccer. So they were one of the schools I grew up with. I still talk to some of the buddies that I watched playing for CCSU. And I mean, senior year, junior year, that was when COVID kind of just kicked everything. So I was kind of limited to my options. But UHart, we talked this before the show started. My boy Patrick Kuchevsky, we've been rivals in high school. So we were kind of talking about what's next for us. I believe he committed first to UHart, and then I eventually got my offer from UHart and took it because we wanted to make something special out of that. And then in the summer before we left, we call him Jiggy, so I'm just gonna say Jiggy instead of Pat. So Jiggy and I found out that the whole thing with the school at UHart was the president didn't like athletics, so he's cutting it from D1 to D3. So we kind of had to before the season even started, we had to figure out what are we gonna do next. It can't be it wasn't a situation where we were focused on the season and then worried about what happened next. It was kind of what's happening next and then the season.
That's fascinating. I mean, you really don't ever see situations like that. I mean, when that broke, that Hartford, and most notably a Hartford team that was a 16 seed in March Madness the year before, was all of a sudden going down from Division I to Division III. You don't really ever see those sorts of demotions, let's call it, in athletics fairly often. So to then having already made the decision to commit and then instantly being like, all right, am I really only going to be here for like a season? Like, all right, then did that add any sort of pressure to perform, knowing that, all right, you're going to be in the spotlight because you're going to have to play well because you know for the betterment of your career, you're going to have to transfer after?
Yeah, so our coaches at University of Hartford were very lenient about, like, our decisions. I know it's, like, against, like, rules to, like, talk to other coaches when you're in the season, but before we even got there, you know, I was kind of had my eye on a few schools that I wanted to, you know, transfer to. But in, like, the guys there, like, I still love all the guys. I still talk to some of them at UHart. It was kind of, I can't say it really was like a team environment. You know, everyone was playing for themselves. They really wanted to, you know, if they were good enough or they were getting enough time, they wanted to get out, just like Jiggy and I did. So it wasn't really like an environment you really wanted to be in just because of the hostility. But I know from other guys in the past at UHart, they were, like, they said it was one of the best schools that they ever been to. So that kind of fluctuated, like, our decision, like, all right, like, are we going to stay until spring and then finish the year, or if it's one and done type of thing.
And so then as that season sort of goes on, you talk about how it's the team plays very individually based, like you've got guys really just playing for themselves rather than playing for the badge. And in a sport like soccer, you need that chemistry more than anything. Like, you can have a team that is garbage, but so long as they have an understanding of how to play with each other, they can compete with the best teams in the world. So when you've got that sort of situation where that chemistry is almost non-existent, how did that season ultimately play out for you? Did you feel like that you excelled as on your own and as a team, or do you feel that the performances were just far below what the team was capable of?
Yeah, I mean, we had some great players on the team. Obviously, I think we definitely had a losing record. I think we only won like 2 or 3 games that year. But considering like what I said, it wasn't really like a team-based type of thing. It definitely wasn't as great as we possibly could have done. But I mean, that's how it goes when these type of situations happen.
And so then after that season wraps up, you're kind of in that weird sort of daze of like, all right, now season's done. They're going down to D3.
Yeah.
I want to stay at this level. Are you then reaching out to coaches that had initially been in contact with you during your high school recruitment process, or is it just like a new slate? This is my film from college. I'm a new player now. Then you just start looking at different levels of universities. Like, where's the difference come in?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just like starting off in high school. You start at the bottom. So once high school finished, I was on a, you know, quote for quote pedestal just because of everything I already committed before my senior season, and then getting to Hartford again, started at the bottom, worked my way up a little bit, and then we had our individual meetings Friday after the week ended, or the season ended, and I basically just told my coaches like, hey, like, obviously, like, you know, like a bunch of the guys are leaving, and I want to enter the transfer portal. So, like you said, it's kind of hard to keep that connection with the coaches when you're in season. Like, obviously they're in season, they already got the other guys that they were looking at and so forth. But there was a few schools I was talking to already that kind of kept me in the back of their mind. But at the end of the day, it's like, what are they going to give me in return? So it becomes a process of, you know, where I find myself playing, what are the coaches offering, the school, the life in the school, the town. So it's all those different variables.
And so before we kind of get into like the schools that you were looking at when you hopped in the portal, I mean, were the coaches at Hartford obviously like you said they were pretty lenient with like how you guys were able to communicate with other schools given the circumstance, but were they in a sense like respecting your decision? Like, were any of them at all like offended that you wouldn't want to like stick it out with that particular coach?
No, they were honestly like, hey, we know you're good. Like, we can see you playing outside of school. Like, we want you to do what's best for you. So I think there was a practice or two that I kind of missed outside the season, like the off season, the fall, to go on a visit. So they were kind of just like, hey, just give us a heads up. Like, we know what you got to do. Just give us a heads up, and that's all they asked for.
That's really neat. I mean, like, obviously it's a very, very particular circumstance, one that you don't see fairly often. But I mean, like, considering the different conversations that I've had with athletes and how coaches can react when people hit the portal and how negative stuff can be. I mean, it almost seems like a bit of a breath of fresh air to have coaches like that are as understanding as they were given the entire circumstance.
Right. They even offered, like, some of the guys, like, hey, like, if you don't find something right away, like, you can come back in the spring and, like, just keep your books open. So I was extremely grateful for what I had at UHart.
Yeah, there you go. And so, I mean, so then now you've entered the portal. Once the season's over, you start talking to some schools. Mm-hmm. And so then, like you said, starting from the bottom, working your way back up. You had a couple schools that you were in kind of conversations with. And so just kind of tell me, how did the whole process sort of pan out during that spring, and then just what led you to ultimately falling on URI?
So I kind of made a decision with my mom about, leaving for the spring, just depending on what schools were offering. So there was different schools that were asking, like, can you stick out the spring? Like, we want to see you play a little bit more than just the fall. But, there was a few schools just like URI that were like, hey, like, we're in a position where we're going to need someone now. And there was a few schools that were like, hey, like I said, play a little bit more and we'll see what happens from there. So I think it was, I don't really want to say any names, but I know it was here, and then 2 or 3 more that were like, hey, like, you can come now, like, you'll play, and then we can figure it out from there.
Okay. And so then just like when you ultimately got those sorts of conversations, those offers saying, hey, we want you to come right now, we want to have you become a part of the squad, get the chemistry going and everything. Was it an easy decision to choose URI given the proximity, or were there a lot of other factors that went into narrowing down that list?
It was really hard. I was sending out, I think I sent out maybe like 50 to 60 emails to schools. So it was whether or not, schools were replying back or it was schools reaching out. And thankfully URI reached out with Jiggy and I. So it wasn't really a package deal with us. It was kind of like I came on a visit, stayed overnight, and then Patrick came the next day, and we were like, oh, like, what's up, dude? Like, we were roommates too. Like, we didn't know, like, I knew he was talking to Coach Bassett. He knew I was talking to Coach Bassett, but we never knew we were going to be at the same time frame.
Interesting. I mean, was that and she's talking about like being like living together and stuff, like when that ultimate decision came, like, did you guys talk to each other before you had officially made the decision, saying, hey, like, I'm thinking about going there, like, what are you thinking, like, and so on?
Yeah, we kind of like set a rule, just like, here are the schools that we're talking to, like, hey, if I'm on a phone call, just like, step out or whatever. But we never really like got into the details just because, like, that's our personal stuff.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like me saying, hey, like, URI reached out, like, that's kind of cool. Like, they're a really good school. Like, the past, like, they won a bunch of A-10 championships. And then I know he said, like, he had a bunch of other schools at top levels, and then he said, like, URI reached out as well. So we were kind of pumped about that.
And so, yeah, then once you kind of, once you both made that decision, and you're like, all right, we're going to URI, we've committed, we're doing that, like, then what's that feeling like knowing that, all right, one of my boys from Hartford, like, he gets it, and so now we're going into this together. Just what was that initial feeling like? And then once you came to campus, having that sort of person to kind of go through the ropes with you again, just what was all of that like for you?
It was a blessing, honestly. Like, him and I have been boys since maybe 15, 16 years old. So, going through the ropes together was kind of a blessing in disguise, not knowing, like, what was really next for both of us. But yeah, coming here in crappy dorm in Merrill, it was definitely a step down from our dorms, but it definitely made things a lot easier. Like, we had a bunch of classes together, so we were together 24/7.
Oh, that's cool. And then so, like, then obviously you got to move into the soccer aspect of it. Then you start getting into that preseason training. Like, you come in, you've got the spring, you got the summer, and so then you're starting to sort of get yourself into the fold. And like you had alluded to, URI at that time coming off of a number of Atlantic 10 championships, Atlantic 10 championship appearances, and so on. Just, did you feel that there was a different level of play when you got there? Did you feel like it was like, all right, like these guys can really ball?
Oh, 100%. I remember our first practice was at I think it's called Worldwide Sports. I think it's in Warwick.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I remember the first training was at 6 a.m. and we got there. One of my roommates now, Michael Tavares, he picked us up on campus, drove us there, and I remember playing small sided with them. I'm like, wow, like it's night and day difference. And it was like, it's one of those moments where it's like, all right, did I make the right decisions? Just because like you're so used to something and then something else happens, and it's just like the difference is just kind of crazy, but it ended up working out.
And so then as the summer is kind of going on, like you talked about how UHart is one of those schools where like, all right, we want you now. And we want to have you. We feel like we believe in you. We see a future with you. And then as the summer goes on, the decision is then made like, all right, I'm going to redshirt. Because I know at the time there were a number of different goalies like on the roster and everything. Right. So how were those conversations going? And then just sort of what was the timeline of that, of coming in, kind of getting yourself acclimated, especially with the goalkeeping coaches and the goalkeeping crew, and then that decision to take a redshirt year? Just how did that process unfold? Yeah, so in my meeting at the end of spring, it was kind of like, hey, you did great in the spring. What are your decisions over summer? Like, what are you going to do? And then they told me, like, hey, we're going to bring in someone from Germany, and, like, the spot's up still for grabs. But that was also, like, kind of big conflict was I've been through 3 goalkeeper coaches already. So that decision between the like my personal coach and the other coaching staff was kind of like a gap. So, that gap kind of just, like, made a decision a little bit iffy. So coming back in the summer in August, we finally got another goalie coach, and the decision kind of fluctuated a little bit, but I mean, like, the decision was made. I decided to redshirt at the end of the season just in case something happened, but there was definitely some chances I knew I think I could have stepped into, but it is what it is at this point. Yeah, and so then kind of just touching on what you had mentioned about the constant switching of the goalkeeping coaches, and you see that happen with transfers and so on, like having to acclimate to different systems. But when you have multiple different position-specific coaches, how, from your perspective, how did that impact your overall performance? Were you having to adjust to different systems? Were the coaches trying to get you to sort of operate in their own vision versus trying to enhance yours? So it's just like, how does that work with the player or position-specific coaches?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously every coach has their different system, but at the end of the day, it's Coach Elliott's decision what he really wants. So the first goalie coach I had was more like, just do your job. The next one was kind of just like, like, do your job. Distribution was a big thing. And then the goalie coach we have now, Gio, one of my honestly best friends. Like, I can rely on him for anything. So the differences between the coaches is kind of just like, personality, who you really fit in with the best. And then, off the field personality and friendship leads onto the field and, your performance and the other goalkeepers around you.
And so then kind of delving a little bit more into that too, once you start to establish a lot of those relationships and you're kind of dropping that moniker of being like the new guy, and you're now fully assimilated into that team, and you've established yourself amongst the culture, and then you've gotten yourself like a good network of friends and teammates that have become closer with. Just like as that first season went on, just how did that sort of develop? Like as you were developing just your relationships with guys, like I know like you and Max Quitchoff are great friends. Just how were those relationships developed over time?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. Max and I kind of just clicked right off the bat. One of our other roommates too, Jason Morrow, we never really met, but we're both from Connecticut, so that kind of helped as well. But hopping out of the goalkeeper side, like the boys here are legit a family. Like it's like this. So nothing really gets undermined. Everyone's feelings are accounted for, and it kind of just went from there.
That's very interesting. I mean, I can tell from my interactions with all of you guys, like doing stuff with the team, like it is very clear that you guys are. It's a vast network of just true brotherhood, and right. Like it's all a big family, and that really helps with the chemistry aspect. I know I've spoken about it in soccer terms in general. I mean, I know I've spoken about it with Max and spoken about it with Rafa Villanueva in the last season of the show, and we were just talking about how key that can be, particularly during like down spells and difficult moments when you can rely on that. You can rely on like that trust in each other where it's like, all right, like we're not gonna We're not going to just crap on each other. We're not going to beat each other while we're down. Like, we can lift each other up.
Right.
And so then just, obviously, like, moving into this season, not redshirting anymore. This is kind of your first, like, official, like, all right, now I have a chance to truly contribute. Going into the start of the year, what were some of those conversations like in terms of what the coaches' expectations were for you were in the 2023 season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was kind of a different conversation that I had my first spring here. It was kind of more of like a, hey, like, we have a transfer coming in, like, he's experienced. We kind of just want, he's going to be the one. So that was kind of off the bat. So my mentality kind of changed from my sophomore year, and it was kind of like, all right, like, I'm still going to do my best. When the time comes, I'll pounce on it. But yeah, it was obviously it's a tough pill to swallow when you told you're not going to be playing. But at the end of the day, you still got to work your hardest.
And so then, how big of a motivating factor was it for you in training to know that, all right, they have that predetermined number one already, and that you had already been here, you'd wanted to take into that spot, but then they're like, all right, like, we still believe in you, we still trust you, but we have this other guy that's a little bit more experienced that we want to lead the line. When you go into practice the next few weeks, months after that, did you see or did you notice, did you become cognizant of any sort of changes in your intensity throughout practice after you had that conversation?
Yeah, I can't lie. My sophomore year, I was kind of just like hard-headed. Like, I knew like what my goal was, and like I wanted this, and this to happen. So coming into last season, it was kind of, all right, like, I know what the expectations are. Let me just follow them. Let me kind of, stick to the script, not think outside the box. And, I was kind of gifted an opportunity the first game. So
yeah, and then I was actually just about to get on to that. That was a very, very interesting game. I remember talking about that game with Roth last in the fall. But going up against Quinnipiac, it's an absolute mess of a day. And then Edu gets sent off.
Yeah.
And so just like, you're going to that first game, is that something that you're even like thinking of? Is like, all right, we're first game in, they already told me that he's the number one, like, and whatever. And like, obviously, for those that follow soccer listening at home, like, goalkeeping is the one position where like you don't ever see them subbed. Like, they're there for the whole game, the whole 90. So as a goalkeeper in that position, are you kind of thinking like game one, just like, all right, I'm just going to sit here, kind of just be a team player for the boys, supportive, and then all of a sudden Coach Elliott's like, hey, I need you right now.
Yeah.
Like, what was that feeling like for you?
So I'm kind of like, I prepare myself for anything that really happens. So it was kind of weird. Like, the night before, like, I had a feeling that something was going to happen. Not knowing what was going to happen, but I had a feeling something was going to happen. And obviously my home state, kind of stepping on the field kind of felt a little good. But yeah, I mean, it was a tough situation to get into. Obviously, when I hopped in, it was a free kick right outside the box. So if I got scored on, it wouldn't have looked really well. But yeah, it was a tough situation. But I mean, we still ended 0-0. I mean, we could have won that game. A few dodgy calls by the ref, but go from there. I guess.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Not much we can do about that, but
it's, I mean, coming out of it had to have really improved your confidence there after that initial conversation, and then be like, all right, well, here you go. Here's your opportunity. 49 minutes into the season.
Yeah.
But and so then the next game, obviously, Edu's suspended for one game, and you're going up against Stonehill. Stonehill, first career start, 3-0 clean sheet, and it was a decent game. I remember sitting there watching that, and Stonehill, like, obviously, it's a team that's just recently jumped up to Division I, sort of almost the reverse of what you had experienced at Hartford. But I mean, just you're at home, getting your first career start at your new home. Just that feeling. Well, walk me through the first half, getting your kicks in.
Yeah, for me it was kind of weird because I haven't really started a game since obviously my senior year of high school. So it was kind of like a different type of preparation for me. Obviously, like I said before, I knew the striker there, Jake Woznicki. He was an All-American my junior year. So I kind of knew what was coming up. But yeah, preparation was definitely a little different. But obviously, like, we knew our personnel. We knew who we were going up with. And yeah, it kind of went from there. I think I played pretty well that game. But obviously, like, the other 10 guys, they balled out that game as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like, and then once you kind of go through that, it's a clean sheet.
Yeah.
Like, even like, the win is great, but and for the team, obviously spectacular, and started the season, it went, I believe, like 3 or 4 games without conceding a goal. Yeah, to open the season, 0-0 against Northeastern, Merrimack, you go 1-0, 1-0 against Connecticut, 0-0 against Quinnipiac, 3-0 against Stonehill, 0-0 against Harvard. You don't concede a goal until September 4th against Providence as a team. And so, I mean, just as a part of that, because you started the Stonehill game and you keep that streak going. I mean, just like from the goalkeeping perspective, that had to feel good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously stepping into that role, you're kind of just like in the back of your head, like, I don't want to mess this up. Like, I don't want the pressure to get to me. I don't want people to know that, like, the pressure's getting to me. So, obviously, like, our goalkeeper core is very strict on, like, you know, do your best. Whatever happens. Just try and minimize the mistakes. But yeah, coming from preseason, we didn't really let in a goal, and you know, going from Quinnipiac, where I hopped in, and then obviously starting Stonehill, that was always in the back of my mind. Like, it's always in my mind. Like, do your best. I've always had a mentality of, like, nothing can really get past me, and I think for every goalkeeper, that's got to be something that they have to, you know, train their mind to take in. So, obviously, like, my boy Jake, we talked about it before. He's telling me how he's gonna do all this stuff, and I texted him after. I'm like, well, you didn't do anything. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously, like, I have great group of guys behind me in my goalkeeper core, and you know that kind of, you know, pushed me to an edge where it's like you're not scoring on me.
And so then, as the season moves forward, Edu hops back into that role, and you're still there. You're still waiting as, like, the next man up, waiting for that opportunity. And as the season's kind of going on, results start to slip a little bit. You've got that 2-1 loss to Providence at home. That was a brutal one.
Yep.
Down 10 men pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then the last minute goal against a deep hated rival is definitely a hard pill to swallow.
Right.
And then you go on. You've got the loss to Dayton, then the loss to Bryant as well. Just being as a member of the team, going through a set of tumultuous results like that. I mean, obviously you weren't on the field for those, but just being a part of that team and just being immersed in that atmosphere, just kind of, what was that like from your perspective? And how did it, I guess I would say, like, how did it impact, like, almost the team's chemistry and training during that time?
Yeah, so obviously that first big loss against Dayton was a tough pill to swallow. We kind of just, like, took a step back, kind of just, like, regroup everything. Nothing really changed from that point until after Bryant. So none of our routine changed. We were kind of, like, you know, sticking with the same guys. And, I mean, that's 100% fine. There's no wrong doing that. But once it usually happens 2 or 3 times, you kind of, like, raise an eyebrow and, like, all right, like, something might have to change. But as a team in whole, we still stuck together. It wasn't pointing fingers at anyone, which is kind of key. It's really crucial, and especially in the D1 level. But I think at that point in time, especially coming from, what was it, like 4 or 5 clean sheets, it was definitely a tough pill to swallow.
And so then, like, it kind of goes back to that brotherhood aspect as well, where it's like, if you have a team that's lacking chemistry, more of that individualistic style of play, like kind of what you were alluding to at Hartford, where it's so easy for the team to just fragment, and then boom, you're going to have 2 bad losses. Those could just metastasize to where you could lose out for the rest of the year if you're not able to kind of get yourself back on track. And then after that Bryant loss, because the Bryant loss, losing the PC in Bryant, I can't imagine.
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
You can't do it if you're at Rhode Island. You can't do it.
Yeah.
But then you bounce back. The next game, it's a 0-0 draw against LaSalle. And from my understanding, I remember when I talked about it with Max, that was a game where it was definitely a confidence boost. Even though no one scored, it was a game where you didn't concede, you didn't lose, you got a point on the board. Just, was there a sense in terms of across the whole team? Is there almost a sense of like a sigh of relief when that game kind of concluded, being like, all right, you know what, that's a step in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a certain expectation for us. Like, we had a few like crucial guys that were out with injuries. So obviously, like, you need to put the ball in the back of net to win games. But I mean, it was definitely a confidence boost. Obviously, LaSalle's a very tough opponent, and the weather, I know, wasn't very great. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, coming from, I think it was like 10 or 11 goals that we conceded in like 2 games, coming from that and then going to a clean sheet, it was definitely a confident boost.
And so then the following 2 games after that, it's 2 losses, 2 difficult ones, one against George Mason, one against St. Louis, and St. Louis are perennial contenders. So you can honestly put that as an outlier. You know what? That's like, granted, last year, the heroics of last year's game were amazing.
Last year was a different story.
That 3-2 win might be one of the best games I've ever watched live in my life.
That atmosphere was unreal. I mean,
in the pouring rain,
rain. We were in the pink jerseys. Something about the pink jerseys. It's I don't know what kicks in our head, but once we wear pink on our chest,
no, you step up when you're playing for Cancer.
Yeah, I guess
you got to step up. But no, but so you come out of those losses, and then it's 2 good games in a row. You've got the game against top 25 Fordham. That's another one.
Yeah,
that's another crazy game.
I remember that game. Man, they've always been tough. I mean, even last year we were down, I think, 2-1 or 3-1 at half, and we ended up tying it 3-3. But yeah, that game was probably one of my top games I ever experienced.
Yeah, and as my mom went to Fordham, we have so many family members of my family that went to Fordham. So seeing that, going to URI, I was instantly like, you know what? All right, Fordham, goodbye, trash, and we're the better Rams, so on and so forth. But and then seeing that game, I was like, whoa,
yeah,
because it kind of just came out of nowhere. Because it's like, obviously you want to say like, all right, you have a chance to win every single game and so on and so forth. But then like in terms of just both teams' competitive form going into that game, it was like, how competitive is it really going to be?
Yeah.
And then you go in, you pull out a statement win. That was incredible. And then is the UMaine Fort Kent game. And then that was what I wanted to talk about with you, because you got to start during that game.
Yeah, I did.
That was the first game I ever commentated for men's soccer. That was my first ever play-by-play game. I remember doing my game prep for that. And I know Aiden Garvey, he's sitting in the other room, he's sitting in the office, he's listening to this right now. He's the one that gave me the game.
What's up, Aiden?
He, when we were doing this, did not mention to me until a little bit later, you guys were playing a JUCO school.
Yeah.
That was very fascinating to have to learn the 7 different websites to find stats on those guys. But, I mean, at the end of the day, though, a very convincing win, considering the overall golfing class. But, I mean, an 8-1 win, you got to play the full game. I mean, just like on senior night, packed crowd. I think it was Greek night too. So we're talking maybe like 2,000 people there.
It was packed. It was close to the PC game. So
yeah, that PC game was insane. So this was pretty close. And considering you're playing I believe they were in NAIA or an equivalent of that.
Those type of JUCO schools are like pretty decent. Like,
oh yeah, they were a national champion the year before.
Yeah, I know they tied UConn last year. Not this past season, but the season before. We actually took, I forgot where he's from, what school he came from, but Rodrigo, he came from an NIA school.
And so like when I was doing my research and I eventually found some of their records from the previous years, I mean, you're talking about a JUCO school that's made up of predominantly international kids that are coming here, that are going to play sports. Like, that's what these schools are set up for. Like not 90, but like a good 60% of these students are athletes, and that's what's making up their student population. And a lot of these guys coming in from Jamaica, from other parts of the Caribbean, they're going to play soccer, and they're trying to get their name out there. And so, I mean, you're looking at it, you're talking about a team that was like 1-0 in 2022, a team that they were like 13-0 the year before. Like, they're a very good team for their level. And so you go in there and you're like, all right, like, as the goalie, like, as getting that sort of like getting yourself in the right state of mind and like going over film and stuff, are you kind of sitting there like trying not to underestimate like the caliber of player that's coming in?
Yeah, I remember in that huddle, I told him like, hey, like, it's senior night. Some of the guys that don't normally play, you know, you get your step on the field for maybe the first time, and it's kind of this situation where it's like, hey, like, we got to think of it as a Fordham game. We can't step back. We got to keep the same mentality. And I remember telling the guys, like, put your head down. Don't listen to anything. This might be your first time playing in front of 1,500, 2,000 people. Keep your head down. do what you got to do to win the game. And I mean, maybe my pep talk worked, maybe it didn't. I mean, an 8-1 win. I mean, I hope.
Yeah, I'd probably say that it worked. But I mean, you're looking at it this way. You had 12 shots against you, 4 on target. You're able to only concede 1 goal, but I will give you some credit. It was a good, from my angle, it was a pretty decent goal.
There was a little mix up, but we won't get into that.
Yeah, but I mean, give credit to AJ Chin, that he was arguably their best player on there. So to give him some of his flowers, but even so, only 1 goal conceded across the full 90 against a team that was actually showing some, in essence, of offensive firepower. I mean, just kind of coming out of that game, your first real Rhode Island game, I would say, just given the atmosphere and so on. Just what were your feelings like afterward?
Man, I was just trying to take it in. Obviously, like, we call it the Kingston skip whenever it gets past, I think it's like 6:37 when the grass gets really slippy. So yeah, I mean, that atmosphere, I knew a few people that were coming to the game beforehand, so obviously trying to block that out as much as I possibly can, that was definitely key. And
so then just you're taking that confidence, you're moving into the end of the year, but then obviously the goalkeeping room keeps on rotating. Mm-hmm. You had your opportunity to show your stuff. You played valiantly, you played very well, and now you have that on your record of like, okay, look, I can compete for you guys, like in a message to the coaching staff moving forward. And so then as the season winds down, it obviously ends in a bit of disappointment. But as the season kind of came to a close, just looking back on like your overall performances, like the 3 performances you had on the field, and then just all of the training sessions you've done, the stuff that you had worked on in small side, 11-a-side, just the different drills. How do you feel that your game has evolved over between when you first initially transferred to now?
I could tell you it's kind of night and day. I came in as, 18, 19. I was so immature. My coach is telling me every day, like, you've grown so much from when you first stepped in, and that was kind of a big part of my redshirt year. But, yeah, I mean, the guys in my class, we've definitely grown up together and really made a big statement. So, obviously, maturing is probably the biggest part in the game where, you're getting the experience, you're growing up a little bit. So, I mean, making those type of plays and, growing up, it's definitely a big part.
And so then that sort of maturity aspect, obviously, like the entire team, when you go through a tumultuous season like this, where you really get you get your rear end handed to you on a bunch of different occasions, and you fall short of the expectations that fans and other people expect of you. Just how do you feel the team as a whole has grown through that? Because I mean, when you look at results like that, you can understand to a degree if teams start to fragment, if heads start to drop, and so on and so forth. But I mean, it seems that as the season had gone on, the chemistry still remained, the passion was still there, at least from my understanding. So I mean, just like from your point of view, how do you feel the team evolved as the season went on? Do you feel that it was still as cohesive and as just as strong of a collective at the start of the year?
Yeah, so I mean, after that Fort Kent game, it was kind of a situation where like, hey, like we need to win out to make the playoffs. So it was still like, a light under our butt. So we were never a team to, just fall back and, all right, like we're done. Like we have to win every single game. That's not going to happen. And as you can see, like I think it was, what was the last game?
The last game was the 2-0 win at Davidson.
Yeah, so Davidson needed to win that game to win regular season, and we
took it from them.
Yeah, we said no thanks, but yeah, I mean, we kind of stepped up, but at the end of the day, like we didn't achieve those goals we really wanted to, but we were still a team that gave it our all. We were never putting our heads down. We never didn't give it 100%, which I'm very grateful for. These guys never did that.
And so then, missing the Atlantic 10 tournament, it's second season in a row, but the expectations when you do that shift. I know that they shifted from 2022 to 2023, probably down the dial a little bit. But now, the difference between the player expectations that you put on yourself personally and the fan expectations definitely change, considering just like how you guys all look at this stuff.
Right. I mean, even in preseason poll for my sophomore year, it was 2022.
Yes.
We were ranked second in Atlantic 10, and we'd even make playoffs. So, I mean,
and so then you go into the preseason poll this year, you drop down even further, and then you have to imagine that once you go into the polls in 2020 for 2024,
I don't even want to look at those polls.
It's probably going to be lower. But I mean, just as we kind of move into this last segment of just talking about the expectations, the first thing I wanted to talk about is just you've been a part of this team now for 2 years. Mm-hmm. You've seen two very strong cores graduate. 2022, you saw that core of Pat Ajiman, Jordan Kudoa, those sort of guys move on, and now you're talking about guys like Kevin Castaneda and a lot of those guys like Shedrick moving on, like a lot of those guys taking off as well. Right. And so as that sort of happens, and as you kind of stay behind and see what's left of the squad, just how do you believe the team is going to be able to handle losing talent like that, and in what ways do you think that they'll be able to bounce back?
Yeah, I mean, putting the talent aside, like, Shad, to be honest, he never really saw the field. And he was one of those guys where it's like, you look up to him to, like, check the room. Like, he's the guy that will say anything to your face. He's not afraid to say anything. So that was definitely a big loss for us outside the field. And then bringing talent in, obviously Kevin was probably one of our best players, and now he's gone. But expectation-wise, I mean, we still have Max as the captain, so as a senior class, as a whole, we're trying to, tell the guys, like, hey, like, we need to do this, this, and this to achieve this. So it's never an expectation of, we're going to just go through it, go through the motions. It's always like, we want to do better every single day.
And so then just like moving into 2024, you've talked about how your game is night and day compared to Hartford. And then we've all obviously touched upon the different conversations that you've had in terms of your role with the team and so on. The goalkeeping room is still going to be competitive.
Yep.
Edu is coming back. You are coming back. And then who knows? There's always the opportunity. There's always the chance that more goalkeepers come in, right. Freshmen come in, transfers, and so on. Just for starters, how prepared are you, in your own opinion, for that goalkeeping battle? In this is probably in my opinion, but and from the way I'm looking at it, it's going to be a lot more competitive now. How prepared are you for that goalkeeping battle?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like what I'm going to take this quote from Tom Brady. He said, once I step on the field, you're not going to get it back. So that's always kind of been my mentality. So, I mean, it's going to stay competitive. Obviously, Edu, he's coming back. He'll probably keep pursuing the starting role. But once I get an opportunity, I'm not going to ever look back. That's my bottom line expectation.
And so then moving forward into practices and moving forward into like the spring and summer sessions, are there other parts of your game that you're looking forward to improving, or are there other sort of skill sets that over this past year in training that you've kind of dabbled in that you feel like now that this could be a time where I could really like move forward and really enhance my overall goalkeeping ability?
Yeah, I could say we could talk to my coach about this. He would always say my decision making is a little off, just because like I love kicking the crap of a soccer ball. Like we can go outside and I'll just kick a ball if I really wanted to. But definitely my decision making is one of the biggest things I think I've grown upon. Especially next year, I'm looking forward to that and making that expectation a little bit higher.
And so then, kind of going back to the overall team aspect of it. I mean, we talked a little bit prior to the show about the caliber of players that are coming in, the transfers coming in, and so on. How do you feel the roster is going to shape up in terms of talent based off of the guys that are coming back now, and then a few of the guys that like have already come in? Because you obviously can't really touch upon the guys that haven't arrived yet, right, or guys that we don't know that may transfer in the later spring cycle. But based off of the talent that you guys have now and the transfers that have already come in that are going to be competing for the spring sort of season, in terms of their actual footballing or footballing ability, how do you feel they stack up? Or you guys as a whole stack up compared to some of the other teams you've played against?
I mean, it's still kind of early to tell. I mean, we're 3 weeks into the semester, so I mean, we're just taking it day by day at this point. We're kind of just making building blocks and, going from there. I mean, we're going to get a few guys coming in that can really help us, reach our goals of getting the playoffs, winning A10s, going to NCAAs. But yeah, I mean, like I said, day by day, we don't really want to, look forward into the future so much to where we're overthinking the now. So keeping ourselves present and, just working our butt off is what we can really do.
And so then you kind of just alluded to what I was going to ask you next in terms of the mental aspect. And this falls more onto you and then the guys that are coming back for this season. I mean, mentally, for the group of guys that have been here for the past 2 seasons, not making the Atlantic 10 tournament, and then just mounds and mounds of pressure falling onto the program to stay relevant, to stay competitive, do you feel that because you've weathered so many storms, particularly like with losses to Dayton, with losses to Bryant, and then missing out in the playoffs for the second year in a row, do you feel like that now that pressure is sort of like a mute point now, that you feel like that, all right, like we've been able to do this, we've been able to still maintain ourselves as athletes, that we shouldn't have to worry about it too much moving into 2024?
Yeah, I think the pressure at this point kind of dialed down just because, like, it's the second season we didn't do that well. But yeah, obviously the new guys, like, they're going to come in with expectations already set on the table. So whether it's, making A10s or having a winning season, like, it's got to be a point where, we can't just let things be. Like, if things need to change, they got to change.
Yeah.
It can't just be, we're playing the same exact way every single game and we're losing 3-0 every game. It's got to be a thing where, we have the guys to do the rotations to make teams better. So whether it's, switching people out, changing a method or whatever, it's got to be a expectation of, something doesn't work. All right, let's try to fix it.
And so then kind of going off just like expectations and everything, moving a little bit away from the athlete way of looking at it, from your own position, you've gone through the high school recruitment process, going to a school that then you knew immediately that you were going to have to transfer from, and then transferring to university where you're then inserted into the team, inserted into the culture. You take a redshirt year, and then the first year that you're allowed to be competitive, that you're playing competitively, you're not making that many starts because of just like the goalkeeping hierarchy and so on. How do you feel that over the past 2 years and so, outside of soccer, like just through your social life at URI, through academics, through other stuff that you've done, that you've grown as a person? Yeah,
I mean, my sophomore year, I kind of just made soccer my life. So that was like, I was in class just like with my head down, like dang, like, I'm not playing, like, I don't know what else to do type of thing. But this year I've kind of, dabbled into some things on campus, trying to make a difference in my community. I'm actually doing an event in April with some kids in Providence, trying to make, student athletes a part of our community. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I've definitely grown with just soccer being my life. Obviously, I want to play outside of college, but every year is a different thing. But definitely growing on that.
And so, like, that sort of community outreach thing, has that always been something that you've wanted to be like a focal point of your personalities, like working and doing some charitable stuff, trying to help mold? Like you said, you were talking about working with some kids up in Providence, like doing stuff like that. Like, is that doing this sort of charitable work to kind of give back to the community that you've come from and to help people sort of, I guess, strive to reach the position that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I've been through some things where it's kind of just like, I kind of look back and it's like, all right, what can I have done different? And, as a kid, I never really knew what I wanted to do with sports. So now just like, I was talking to my mom about it today, and it's just like, finding something where I can help others not go through the things that I've been through is probably going to help me in the long run, not just them. So, like, I'm actually starting like a pen pal group for student athletes, and then some kids in South Kingston who are they can just reach out, ask any questions, all that type of stuff. So helping them is probably my best way of not letting soccer involve myself outside of, in my actual life. It's kind of separating things and just like, not keeping soccer in my frontal lobe. So
that's a very mature way of looking at things. I mean, like you even kind of talked about it, where it's like the maturity has grown, like in you as an athlete, like you've become more mature as a player, and I mean it's seeping out into the rest of your life, and it's very admirable to see stuff like that when you do what I do and you work with a lot of athletes. You really learn like different personalities, and you see like how people are able to use effectively what is a gift, their athletic ability, their gift, to help better not only themselves but the people around you. So it's very admirable that you're looking into trying to find ways to do that. It's very cool.
Thank you.
But as we're approaching the end of our time, I just wanted to say, Nate, this was absolutely awesome. I, again, love talking to you guys.
My pleasure.
So thankful for having you come on the show today.
Of course, anytime.
Yeah, and so thank you for everybody listening at home. We will be back next week, going to try and find a new team. I'm still doing my due diligence, going to try and see, going to look into maybe some spring sports now. I know baseball is going to be coming up shortly, so we're going to try and dabble into some new teams that have not been featured on the show, but I'll keep you posted. Obviously, take a look at the Twitter and the Instagram, MarksPod on both sites. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you all for listening today, and we'll see you all next week.